Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. In this session, we shall discuss and analyze a major development that has occurred with regard to the ongoing Gaza war. The day before yesterday, Israel announced that it has killed the chief of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, and this happens to be one of the biggest developments in the context of the Gaza war. Israel had considered Yahya Sinwar as the most wanted terrorist. Israel had labeled Yahya Sinwar as the chief architect of last year's deadly attack that Hamas carried out against Israel on October 7th, which started the Gaza war in the first place. So with the killing of the chief of Hamas, it marks a significant milestone, and experts believe that this could potentially be a major turning point in the Gaza war. There are speculations about a possible end to the war with a ceasefire and the release of Israeli hostages. Or the other possibility is that Israel may not end the war anytime soon. It might continue the war, but definitely the killing of Yahya Sinwar marks a significant development in the ongoing conflict. So in this session, let us analyze these developments and understand why Yahya Sinwar was such a significant figure within Hamas, why his killing represents a major development in West Asia, how could this influence the Gaza war, and will the Gaza war come to an end? This is what we will examine in a short, crisp session. So first, let's understand who was Yahya Sinwar and what was the development that occurred day before yesterday. Israeli forces, which were conducting regular ground operations in Gaza targeting Hamas militants, they encountered 3 militants who were running from building to building in the Rafah region, which is a major border crossing with Egypt. So Israeli forces engaged these 3 militants. There was an exchange of fire, and one of them, he took shelter in a building, and the Israeli forces opened mortar fire, decimating most of the building. And eventually they sent in a drone as well to see the damage and whether the militants were killed. And the drone footage in itself was quite shocking. They saw a figure lying on the couch, seriously injured, someone who resembled Yahya Sinwar, the chief of Hamas, the most wanted terrorist according to Israel. Eventually, Yahya Sinwar was killed in this operation. So later, Israeli forces conducted a DNA verification as well to confirm that the killed militant was indeed the most wanted terrorist, the chief of Hamas. So with this confirmation, Israel announced to the world that it had eliminated the chief of Hamas, and thus marking a major milestone in this war. Now please understand, the killing of Yahya Sinwar was more accidental than a targeted operation, because in recent weeks, Israel has eliminated most of the top leaders of not just Hamas, but even the top leaders of Hezbollah. Israel recently killed Ismail Haniyeh, the then chief of Hamas, who headed the Hamas Politburo. Israel recently killed the second in command of Hamas, Mohammad Deif, the military commander of the Al-Qassam Brigade, which is responsible for the military operations of Hamas. And more importantly, Israel recently killed Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Other senior commanders and leaders of Hezbollah were also eliminated in recent weeks. All these operations were targeted intelligence-based operations. Israel knew whom it was exactly targeting, where they were located, and based on specific intelligence, these operations were carried out. But the killing of Yahya Sinwar is different. It was not an intelligence-based targeted operation. It was a regular operation that Israeli defense forces were carrying out, and by chance, they encountered these militants, and one of them happened to be none other than Yahya Sinwar, the chief of Hamas. So by luck, Israel has secured a major breakthrough. But also don't forget, Israel indeed had cornered the leaders of Hamas. Over months of operations targeting the network of Hamas, maybe Yahya Sinwar was cornered, and eventually with no further options left, he was eventually discovered in Rafah, and following which he has been eliminated. Now coming to the most important point, why is Yahya Sinwar such an important figure? Why are we even having this discussion? what is so important about the killing of this Hamas leader? Please understand, Yahya Sinwar had a lot of following in Gaza amongst Palestinians. He rose through the ranks of Hamas to emerge as its leader after Ismail Haniyeh was recently killed. So Yahya Sinwar is someone who enjoys popular support. He's someone who is seen as a heroic figure and now considered as a martyr. And more importantly, Yahya Sinwar built the organization from the initial days. If you look at his background, he was someone who suffered from the outcome of the Israel-Palestine conflict. He and his family from 1948 to 1960s, they personally suffered from the Israel-Palestine conflict. When Israel declared unilateral independence in 1948 and carried out an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians to evict them from historic Palestine to create Israel, it was Yahya Sinwar's family which was affected, along with lakhs of Palestinians who were displaced as refugees. This event is referred to as the Palestinian Nakba, or a catastrophe by the Palestinians. So Yahya Sinwar's parents had been displaced when Israel declared unilateral independence, which triggered the exodus of Palestinian refugees. Eventually, he was born in a refugee camp in 1962. So throughout his initial years, and as well as his parents, they had gone through the entire impact of Israel-Palestine conflict, and this formed the upbringing of Yahya Sinwar. In fact, if you look at most leaders of Hamas, most of them were victims of the Palestinian cleansing that happened when Israel declared independence in 1948. They shaped their opinion based on the Palestinian Nakba and the Palestinian land which was eventually taken away by Israel. So this is what led some of these Palestinians to believe that they were fighting a resistance. They were leading a liberation war against Israel. So Yahya Sinwar at a very young age joined the Muslim Brotherhood in 1980s. Muslim Brotherhood is a radical outfit mainly based out of Egypt, which was resisting Israeli occupation of Palestine, and Yahya Sinwar joined the organization. In 1982, he was even arrested briefly by Israeli forces. Later in 1987, when the first intifada happened, when the first Palestinian uprising happened in 1987, that is when Hamas was established as a radical political militant organization. Hamas is essentially seen as an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood, and Yahya Sinwar played a key role in the establishment of Hamas. As Hamas was established by the then leaders, Yahya Sinwar, who was a young militant, he established the dreaded Al-Majid force, which was an internal security force of Hamas that mainly targeted the Palestinian informants who were working for Israeli intelligence. Those Palestinians who were working as informants for Israeli intelligence and defense forces were specifically targeted by this outfit called Al-Majid force, which was the internal security force of Hamas. It was founded and headed by Yahya Sinwar in 1987-88. So as the head of Al-Majid, Yahya Sinwar was directly responsible for the brutal killing of several Palestinian informants and as well as few Israeli soldiers. For these offenses, Yahya Sinwar was arrested by Israeli forces in 1988, and he would remain in jail for 22 years until 2011. He spent most of his life in Israeli prisons, and eventually he was released in 2011 in exchange for Israeli hostages who were held by Hamas. Hamas had taken few Israeli soldiers as hostages, and to get their release, Israel back in 2011 agreed for a prisoner exchange, and it was during this hostage deal that Yahya Sinwar was released by Israel. In fact, Israel went on to regret this deal. Especially the release of Yahya Sinwar is seen as one of the biggest mistakes of Israel, because eventually Yahya Sinwar would rise up the ranks of Hamas after his release, and in 2017 he became the chief of Hamas in Gaza. As Ismail Haniyeh, who was recently killed by Israel, became the leader of Hamas, the leader of the Politburo, then Yahya Sinwar became the chief of Hamas in Gaza, running the military operations of Hamas on the ground. So this is how Yahya Sinwar established himself and built a popular following amongst several radical Palestinians. Now, this is where you need to understand the significant achievement of Israel in the last few weeks. In the ongoing Gaza war, Israel has stepped up and escalated the conflict with a series of covert operations and targeted intelligence-based operations, through which Israel has eliminated most of the leadership of Hamas and as well as that of Hezbollah. Iran is considered to be the sponsorer of both the outfits. Ismail Haniyeh, you can see him in the image over here, when he became the leader of Hamas and headed the Politburo, which is based out of Qatar, Ismail Haniyeh relocated to Qatar, and from Qatar he was heading the Hamas outfit. Whereas in Gaza Strip, on the ground, the operations, the military operations of Al-Qassam Brigade was commanded by this individual, whom you can see in the image, Mohammed Deif. This was under the leadership of Yahya Sinwar, who was the leader of Hamas in Gaza. So all these Hamas leaders have been taken out by Israel, and more importantly, Israel even eliminated Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, the leader of Hezbollah. Along with Nasrallah, several top commanders of Hezbollah also have been eliminated by Israel. These were all targeted intelligence-based operations. In fact, Ismail Haniyeh, who was sheltered in Qatar, he went to Tehran a few months ago in July to attend the presidential inauguration of the new Iranian president. So when Ismail Haniyeh was in Tehran under Iranian protection, that is when Israel allegedly carried out a targeted airstrike, which eliminated Ismail Haniyeh, the then leader of Hamas. With the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar became the next chief, and he was running Hamas on the ground in Gaza Strip, running its military operations. And this outfit was delivered a significant blow when the commander of Al-Qassam Brigade, the second in command of the Hamas outfit, Mohammed Deif, was also killed in a targeted strike. The killing of Nasrallah and other top commanders of Hezbollah also came as a major blow to Iran. So these recent killings by Israel, some of them targeted intelligence-based operations and some of them were by chance operations like the killing of Yahya Sinwar. These eliminations that Israel has done of the top leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah marks a significant victory for Israel. Because Israel, after October 7, 2023, had sworn to take revenge on Hamas and to wipe out Hamas from the map. It declared Yahya Sinwar as the chief architect along with Mohammed Deif, and now it has basically avenged the attack by eliminating both these leaders of Hamas, who were considered as the chief architects of last year's terror attack, which started the Gaza war. It has taken out the leadership of the Politburo of Hamas by killing Ismail Haniyeh and eliminated the leadership of Hezbollah as well. So this is a big setback for Iran as its proxies have been weakened. Both Hezbollah, Hamas happen to be the proxies of Iran, and this marks a major development for Israel. That is why the killing of Yahya Sinwar in particular is one of the most significant developments. Because when Israel went to war last year, it had sworn to eliminate the chief architects of the attack. This included Yahya Sinwar, who at that point was the chief of Hamas in Gaza. Later, he became the chief of Hamas itself after Ismail Haniyeh was killed. And Israel always wanted to eliminate Mohammed Deif, the commander of Al-Qassam Brigade, the military arm of Hamas. They were considered as the chief architects of the October 7th attack, which pushed Israel to attack Gaza. And in this ongoing war, Israel has already killed more than 42,000 Palestinians. Most of them are innocent civilians. So Israel is under tremendous global pressure to end this war as soon as possible. So elimination of the chief architects of the attack marks a victory, at least a symbolic victory, which weakens the outfit as well. And this could potentially create an opportunity for Israeli allies like United States to now push Israel towards a ceasefire. In fact, as soon as the news broke out that Yahya Sinwar had been killed, United States and other Israeli allies congratulated Israel. They celebrated the killing of the Hamas chief, because this is indeed a big milestone and US understands the significance of the development. After congratulating Israel and Netanyahu, Biden urged Netanyahu to use this opportunity to end the war as soon as possible. Because even US is under pressure as it continues to back the Israeli war in Gaza, which has already killed more than 42,000 people, triggering a massive humanitarian tragedy. US is funding and arming Israel, enabling this war, where Israel is accused of committing a genocide. So US would like to bring this war to an end as soon as possible, hopefully by the time Biden steps down in another couple of months before the American elections. So Biden has pushed Israel to use this opportunity to work out a ceasefire, to secure the release of Israeli hostages, which has been a main point for Israel since October 7th last year. Now with the elimination of Hamas leadership, Hamas is in disarray. So if Israel is able to reach out to the Hamas outfit and work out a deal, it might secure the lives of the hostages who are still alive, and hopefully this could bring about a ceasefire and end the war at least temporarily. But however, Netanyahu has other plans. It is unlikely that the war is going to come to an end just because the chief of Hamas was killed. Benjamin Netanyahu has said this is indeed a big victory, a big milestone. He said that Israel has avenged the terror attack and the 1,200 plus Israelis who lost their lives. In a way, justice has been done to them, according to Netanyahu. But however, he said this is not the end of the war, meaning Israel is likely to continue the war. But however, he mentioned that this definitely marks the beginning of the end of the war. So we might see a possible hostage deal in the coming weeks or months, which might potentially lead to a ceasefire. So this is one possibility, especially since US and other allies are pressurizing Israel and Hamas has been weakened, the top leadership has been eliminated. Hezbollah also has been weakened, the top leaders are eliminated. So this is reason enough for Israel to declare victory in the war and work out a hostage exchange deal, secure the lives of Israeli hostages and agree for a ceasefire. But the other possibility is that Netanyahu may not end the war anytime soon. Because when Israel launched the Gaza war last year, the goal was to wipe out Hamas completely, to eliminate Hamas entirely, including the lower level cadres. So if Israel continues the war with the goal of eliminating Hamas entirely, the war might continue to drag. Because even without the leadership, the outfit can still wage a low level insurgency, which might be very difficult and challenging for Israeli forces to carry out. And also don't forget, Netanyahu belongs to the far right conservative section of Israeli politics. His party, the Likud party, and its coalition partners who belong to the far right ultra conservative ideology, they believe that this is an opportunity for Israel. They should ensure that Hamas is wiped out. And there are even talks within Israel of the so-called Greater Israel, of expanding Israeli territory by trying to occupy territories in neighboring countries like Lebanon, Jordan, even though it's a far-fetched possibility. But within the far-right conservative circles in Israel who back the Likud party, which is Netanyahu's party, there are discussions, there are calls being given that the war should continue at any cost. Even if the price is high, Israel, they say that should pay the price and wage this war and continue the war to wipe out Hamas and even annex territories from other countries, from Lebanon, Jordan, etc., to bring to reality the so-called Greater Israel. So this is the other extreme, the other possibility, where the war will continue. Netanyahu has already said the war is not going to end, but he did mention this is the beginning of the end of the war. So most likely, there might be a hostage exchange and a possible ceasefire. So that is why the killing of Yahya Sinwar is a big, big development. And also don't forget, within Israel, there is a divided opinion. There are many Israelis who want to end this brutal war and secure the hostages through a hostage deal. Recently, lakhs of Israelis protested against the radical policies of Netanyahu and his government. Many Israelis don't want this war to drag and continue, which is resulting in a humanitarian tragedy, because they know this will only perpetuate a cycle of violence. If you look at the background of Hamas leaders, right? if you look at their formative years, it was essentially the violence of 1950s, 1960s, which turned them into radical extremists, which perpetuated the cycle of violence, where both sides have been targeting and killing on both sides. So many Israelis want this war to end, and more importantly, the hostage families, they want their hostages, they want their family members to come back alive. So they are putting pressure on Israel as well. So this could be one of the possibilities. Now that Israel has achieved one of its major primary objectives in the war, which is to wipe out the leadership of Hamas, this could be a potential opportunity for a ceasefire and a return of the hostages. So coming to the bigger question, does this mark the end of Hamas? What will happen to Hamas next? Now that the leaders are gone, Ismail Haniyeh has been killed, Mohammed Deif was killed, and now Yahya Sinwar has been killed. Does it mark the death of Hamas? That is the big question. See, when the leadership of any such group is eliminated, definitely the group goes into disarray. There is chaos in the group. There is no command and control. The cadres will be demoralized, no doubt. But just the elimination of the leaders is not enough to wipe out such strong ideological movements. If that was the case, the killing of Osama bin Laden should have wiped out Al-Qaeda. The killing of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi should have wiped out Islamic State. But usually that doesn't happen. Usually these groups which are battle hardened, which are strongly motivated, they will find ways, they will find new leaders to come back, to regroup and come back stronger. So Hamas is likely to be headed by Khaled Mashal, who will replace Yahya Sinwar. But experts believe that Khaled Mashal may not match the stature, the demeanor of Yahya Sinwar. As I said, Yahya Sinwar was legendary because of the number of years he spent in Israeli prison and the way he led Hamas later. He was someone who was very popular on the ground, who could mobilize Palestinians to fight for Hamas. So there are doubts whether the next leader can do the same, given that the leadership is almost eliminated and even Iran, the main sponsorer, is on the back foot. So most likely, Hamas might lie low for some time. The new leadership will take time to regroup, and as we discussed, a low-scale insurgency might continue. Since Israel is not looking to end the war anytime soon, a low-scale insurgency might continue, thus dragging the war, increasing the suffering and the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza. But don't forget, this will only perpetuate the deadly cycle of violence. Eye for an eye will make the world blind. That is exactly what has happened in the Israel-Palestine issue. When Israel declared unilateral independence in 1948, it violated the two-state plan. It snatched the right of Palestinians to form their own country. And eventually, the Jewish settlers ethnically cleansed the Palestinians from their land, which displaced Palestinian refugees, which is the Nakba, the catastrophe, which basically gave rise to Palestinian extremism. And Israel has countered Palestinian extremism with brutal force through covert assassinations, large-scale use of military force. And in return, Palestinian extremist groups like Hamas and others have carried out major attacks, including serious terrorist attacks, which has only perpetuated the cycle of violence. So you look at any of the leaders, Ismail Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, the founder of Hamas as well. They were all byproducts of this period of violence from 1950s to 1960s. That is what led them to start and establish Hamas in 1980s, which until now has continued and dragged the cycle of violence. So now with 42,000 Palestinians killed in the Gaza war, there will be many more victims. There will be many more who will be shaped by these events, and many of them might take the radical path, the extremist path, which will just continue the cycle of violence in another 10-15 years. And if Israel retaliates again, the whole cycle repeats, leading to this deadlock where there may not be any peaceful solution over the Israel-Palestine question. So let us see how things will play out in the coming days. This is what you need to understand. You need to know who was Yahya Sinwar, why the killing of the chief of Hamas is such a big significant development. Does this mark a turning point in the Gaza war? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think the war might end soon, or do you think Israel will continue the war until it wipes out Hamas? Or will the cycle of violence perpetuate? Do let me know in the comments. If you like the session, do press the like button. don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching.